drew you down on the asking price." Babbitt spoke well, and often, at these orgies of commercial righteousness, about the realtor's function as a seer of the future development of the community, and as a prophetic engineer, clearing the pathway for inevitable changes, which meant that a real estate broker could make money by guessing which way the town would grow. This guessing he called vision. In an address to the Boosters Club he had admitted, "It is at once the duty and privilege of the realtor to know everything about his own city and its environs, where a surgeon is a specialist on every vein and mysterious cell in the human body, and the engineer upon electricity in all its phases, or every bolt of some great bridge majestically arching over a mighty flood. The realtor must know his city inch by inch, and all its faults and virtues." Though he did not know the market price, inch by inch, of certain districts of Zenith, he did not know whether the police force was too large or too small, or whether it was in alliance with gambling and prostitution. He knew the means of fireproofing buildings, and the relation of insurance rates to fireproofing, but he did not know how many firemen there were in the city, how they were trained and paid, or how complete their apparatus. He sang eloquently the advantages of proximity of school buildings to rentable homes, but he did not know that it was worth while to know whether the city schoolrooms were properly heated, lighted, ventilated, furnished. He did not know how the teachers were chosen, and though he chanted, "One of the boasts of Zenith is that we pay our teachers adequately," that was because he had read the statement in the Advocate-Times. Himself, he could not have given the average salary of teachers in Zenith or anywhere else. He had heard it said that conditions in the county jail and the Zenith City Prison were not very scientific. He had, with indignation at the criticism of Zenith, skimmed through a report in which the notorious pessimist Seneca Doane, the radical lawyer, asserted that to throw boys and young girls into a bullpen crammed with men suffering from syphilis, delirium torments, and insanity was not the perfect way of educating them. He had controverted the report by growling, "Folks that think a jail ought to be a bloomin' hotel, Thurno, make me sick. If people don't like a jail, let 'em behave themselves and keep out of it. Besides, these reform cranks always exaggerate it." That was the beginning and quite completely the end of his investigation into Zenith charities and corrections. And as to the vice districts, he brightly expressed it, "Those are things that no decent man monkeys with. Besides, matter of fact, I'll tell you confidentially, it's a protection to our daughters and to decent women to have a district where tough nuts can raise Cain. Keeps 'em away from our own homes." As to industrial conditions, however, Babbitt had thought a great deal, and his opinions may be coordinated as follows. "A good labor union is of value because it keeps out radical unions, which would destroy property. No one ought to be forced to belong to a union, however. All labor agitators who try to force men to join a union should be hanged. In fact, just between ourselves, there oughtn't to be any unions allowed at all. And as it's the best way of fighting the unions, every businessman ought to belong to an employers' association and to the Chamber of Commerce. In union there is strength. So any selfish hog who doesn't join the Chamber of Commerce ought to be forced to." In nothing, as the expert on whose advice families moved to new neighborhoods to live there for a generation, was Babbitt, more splendidly innocent than in the science of sanitation. He did not know a malaria-bearing mosquito from a bat. He knew nothing about tests of drinking water, and in the matters of plumbing and sewage he was as unlearned as he was voluble. He often referred to the excellence of the bathrooms in the houses he sold. He was fond of explaining why it was that no European ever bathed. Someone had told him, when he was 22, that all cesspools are unhealthy, and he still denounced them. If a client impertinently wanted him to sell a house which had a cesspool, Babbitt always spoke about it before accepting the house and selling it. When he laid out the Glen Oriole acreage development, when he ironed woodland and dipping meadow into a glenless, orioleless, sunburnt, flat, prickly, with small boards displaying the names of imaginary streets, he righteously put in a complete sewage system. It made him feel superior. It enabled him to sneer privately at the Martin Lambsman development, Avonlea, which had a cesspool, and it provided a chorus for the full-page advertisements in which he announced the beauty, convenience, cheapness, and supererogatory healthfulness of Glen Oriole. The only flaw was that Glen Oriole sewers had insufficient outlet, so the waste remained in them, not very agreeably, while the Avonlea cesspool was a warring septic tank. The whole of the Glen Oriole project was a suggestion that Babbitt, though he really did not hate men recognized as swindlers, was not too unreasonably honest. Operators and buyers prefer that brokers should not be in competition with them as operators and buyers themselves, but attend to their clients' interests only. It was supposed that the Babbitt-Thompson Company were merely agents for Glen Oriole, serving the real owner, Jake Offutt. But the fact was that Babbitt and Thompson owned 62% of the Glen. The president and purchasing agent of the Zenith Street Traction Company owned 28%, and Jake Offutt, a gang politician, a small manufacturer, a tobacco-chewing old factory store who enjoyed dirty politics, business diplomacy, and cheating at poker, had only 10%, which Babbitt and the traction officials had given him for fixing health inspectors and fire inspectors, and a member of the State Transportation Commission. But Babbitt was virtuous. He advocated, though he did not practice, the prohibition of alcohol. He praised, though he did not obey, the laws against motor speeding. He paid his debts. He contributed to the church, the Red Cross, and the Y.M.C.A. He followed the custom of his clan, and cheated only as it was sanctified by precedent, and he never descended into trickery, though, as he explained to Paul Riesling, "Course, I don't mean to say that I ever had write it literally true, or that I always believe everything I say when I give some buyer a good strong sellin' spiel. You see, you can see it like this. In the first place, maybe the owner of the property exaggerated when he put it into my hands, and it certainly isn't my place to go proving my principal a liar. And then most folks are so darn crooked themselves that they expect a fellow to do a little lying. So if I was fool enough to never whoop at the ante, I'd get the credit for lying anyway, in self-defense. I got to toot my own horn, like a lawyer defending his client. His burden duty, ain't it, to bring out the poor dub's good points? Why, the judge himself would bawl out a lawyer if he didn't, even if they both knew the guy was guilty. But even so, I don't pad out the truth like Cecil Rountree, or Thayer, or the rest of those reelers. In fact, I think a fellow that's willing to deliberately up and profit by lying ought to be shot." Babbitt's value to his clients was rarely better shown than this morning, in the conference at 11:30 between himself, Conrad Lyte, and Archibald Purdy. 5. Conrad Lyte was a real estate speculator. He was a nervous speculator. Before he gambled he consulted bankers, lawyers, architects, contracting builders, and all of their clerks and stenographers who were willing to be cornered and give him advice. He was a bold entrepreneur, and he desired nothing more than complete safety in his investments, freedom from attention to details, and the 30 or 40% profit which, according to all authorities, a pioneer deserves for his risks and foresight. He was a stubby man with a cap-like mass of short gray curls and clothes which, no matter how well cut, seemed shaggy. Below his eyes were semicircular hollows, as though silver dollars had been pressed against them and left an imprint. Particularly and always Lyte consulted Babbitt, and trusted in his slow cautiousness. 6 months ago Babbitt had learned that one Archibald Purdy, a grocer in the indecisive residential district known as Linden, was talking of opening a butcher shop besides his grocery. Looking up the ownership of adjoining parcels of land, Babbitt found that Purdy owned